Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Flip-Flop Family podcast. I'm Xylene and thank you so much for listening to another episode. There is a bunch of different episodes with myself and a member of the Flip-Flop family and also on my own with lots of different topics, craziness that's going through my mind, which I'm hoping that you can relate to. This week's episode is a bit more somber, but again, I feel that it's something that everyone will unfortunately go through in their lives. It's about grief. This week, my community suffered a loss, and it really triggered too many familiar feelings, which compelled me to talk about it on this podcast. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Stick around and let's talk about it. Losing someone you love always seems to feel different each time you experience it. Well, I guess I can only speak from personal experience, but I believe that no two people will grieve in the same way, and there's no wrong or right way to experience it. We may have unique relationships with the deceased, personal experiences that create that closeness, which is then absolutely shattered when you lose them. Sometimes we may not even know the deceased. That's happened to me so many times where I find out someone has passed away and I just empathize with their situation, or I'm really close to their loved ones, and it hits you without you really expecting it to. Death is just so finite. What happens after death is just unknown. If you're religious or spiritual, you may have certain beliefs about life after death. But I feel regardless of any beliefs, we will never really know. And maybe it's the not knowing that is so hard to comprehend. I recently lost my father-in-law, and I often imagine him in my brain's version of heaven, enjoying a plate of rice and curry and listening to his favourite song, Angels and Alcohol. But is that just my brain's coping mechanism to make peace with the tragedy? I mean, how are we really meant to get over losing our nearest and dearest? The life cycle is just unfair, isn't it? I mean, I want to swear, to be honest. I want to say it's just absolutely you know what I mean. We're born, loved, hopefully, learn to love, hopefully, create meaningful relationships. And then we lose the people that make our lives worth living. I know I'm kind of getting a bit deep right now, and it may sound really morbid, but unfortunately, it is true. Today, weirdly, I started thinking about how long I might live for. So I'm 41, and then I was working out how many years I might live for, and then I was working out, I don't know why I do this to myself, I was working out how old Emiliana and Zach would be if I died at that age. So let's say at like 76 or 80, or, if I was really lucky and had a really good innings and was really healthy and lived all the way to 90 still doing yoga. But eventually, Emiliana and Zach will lose me and Ben. And the thought of that is just so crushing. But there's no way around it. I started singing that song today. What is it? Oh God, I can't remember. What was I singing? Do you really wanna live forever and ever and ever, forever young? Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's how you can see I'm not a pop star. But that song, I was just found myself singing, forever young. I wanna be forever young. But do I? I don't know. I just don't want to go through death. It's just such a horrible thing and such a hard thing. Some say losing someone in old age is easier than losing a younger person, or losing someone suddenly, like in an accident. And that may be true, but death in whichever way it occurs is awful. As I've suffered a lot of bereavement, I always try to offer some advice to friends or family that also have a loss. And the resounding thing that I tend to say is time is a healer. And that may sound like a bit of a cliche. If you Google what to say to people when they've lost someone, that might come up. Time is a healer. You've probably heard of it. But with some of the people that I've lost in my life, time has not fully healed, but the wound has definitely not stung as much as time has gone on. It's got a bit easier. But I believe that with some losses in your life, maybe just one or two people, there will be those people that you just cannot live without. And it's those losses that I think about. The depth and quality of your bond with a person significantly impacts how you grieve. It might be past experiences with grief that influence how you process the new loss, or cultural influences may affect how you express your emotions. Like my household is a part of two faiths, and our funerals are dealt with so differently. And I feel like I want to take the best of both worlds when I die. Because for me, talking about the bereaved is such amazing therapy. Exchanging stories, talking to people that knew your loved one in different capacities. It's almost like you can get to know the person in a completely different light. Talking and remembering the good times. What a beautiful thing. And just so heartwarming. Ben's family is really, really musical. So whenever there is a bereavement, there's always singing, and it's just so uplifting. But in my faith, we also have singing, but in the form of prayers, and it offers a lot of comfort. So there is good things to take from both, and I'm definitely going to have a very eclectic funeral. I know Ben talks about wanting to have this massive mausoleum, and he wants like horses and carriages, and he just wants this whole big like do. And I'm just like, yeah, I hope you're putting money aside for that, mate. But when I pass away, I don't want any money spent on my funeral. I want everyone to talk about me all day long, but I don't want anyone to spend any money. Any money that if I do leave any money behind, I just want my loved ones to just go and spend it and have like an amazing holiday and do things with their lives and, you know, try and use it to create opportunities. I'm acting like I'm going to leave millions, but you know what I mean? I don't want money spent on putting me in the ground. I just believe that it doesn't matter where I am. If I meant something to you, I will always be with you. And the way I feel is actually encompassed in this quote by Helen Keller. What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes part of us. I often have this funny thing with Ben, as I do love him deeply. I think it was one of the Shrek kind of spin-offs, you know, the little gingerbread men, and there's a gingerbread man and a gingerbread woman, and there's one episode, and I think the gingerbread man is really lonely, so he basically makes a gingerbread wife because he's always alone, and he's singing that song, you know, lonely, I'm so lonely. So he makes a gingerbread wife, and he starts feeling really sort of full and really happy that he has a companion. But then she starts getting a bit like overpowering, and he kind of realizes that actually he kind of likes his own space. And then she sounds really freaky towards the end, where he tries to sort of get rid of her, and she just keeps coming back, like she just won't leave him alone. Like it's like almost like a horror scene with like a gingerbread woman, like, you know, throwing herself out the window and just kind of swiping down, like not leaving him alone. And I always do this to Ben, like especially when I'm like, I know I've irritated him, I'm like, babe, don't worry, because I'll always be with you forever and ever and ever and ever. And sometimes I just go on, and he gets so irritated. But the moral of the story is, I'm not leaving you. If I meant something to you when I pass away, I will always be there, whether it's to haunt you or whether it's to bring you joy. I'm not sure, but sorry, I've kind of gone off on a tangent and totally explained to you how I want to be buried. But what I'm trying to say is that we all experience loss, and we need to find a way to deal with it. Sadly, Emiliana and Zach have also experienced the same losses that I have. And when you can't process death, imagine young minds, imagine what is going through them and what they're actually thinking. And it's so natural to try and shelter your children, and maybe you think about whether you should let them come to the funeral or whether you should really give them the true story. But the advice is to be open and honest, and just using appropriate language depending on the age of the child. Allow them to talk, ask questions about their feelings, and share memories, and even use art or let them keep a diary, because it's not easy, depending on the age of the child, to be able to articulate their feelings. Like I said, I think most adults struggle to articulate their feelings. So these poor children that do go through bereavement, especially close bereavements, it must just be an absolute circus in their brain. The advice is to allow older children to decide if they actually want to attend the funeral. I know that with some family members that have passed away, Zach has actually said, I don't think I can go. And I think that's just, he is quite mature, and I think he knows himself. But if you can give them a choice, then that's probably the right thing to do. And again, if you can frame the day as more of a celebration of life, which I think is just, I feel like everybody should do that. And I know that not all faiths and religions and just people's decisions, I know not everybody does that, but having a wake and being able to talk it really is definitely, I think, the best way to help you get through the day. We did this thing at the end of the day after my father-in-law's funeral, when everyone had gone home and it was just sort of close family. And we lit those paper lanterns and we just let them go into the sky. It was like a mini scene of the end of Rapunzel, if you've watched that, when she's on the boat and the lanterns go up. Obviously, a much minor version of that. But it was so beautiful. And it was such a nice way to sort of say, like, goodbye, and we'll miss you and we love you. And then it was so crazy. I don't know if it was a plane or a helicopter, not a helicopter, maybe it was a plane, I don't know, but it looked like a shooting star. Like straight after we lit off the lanterns and we were all looking up at the sky, we saw a shooting star. It was almost like my father-in-law's way of saying goodbye in return and thank you for giving me such a nice send-off. But I just think there are so many things you can do to just try and lighten the load and make it feel nicer, I guess, because at the end of the day, the situation is awful. Grief, especially in young children, can be experienced for extended periods of time, and they may jump in and out of grief, which is called puddle jumping. I know that Zach definitely does that, and I'm sure we do as adults as well. We think we're okay, and then all of a sudden it just hits us again, and we go through it all over. Death is just so overwhelming to most people, and we can experience different emotions from anger, sadness. So you could even make a memory box as a coping mechanism, which you can go back and forth to time and time again whenever you're feeling low. We always mention the loved ones that we've lost in our lives, particularly at prayer, at the dinner table, or when we're celebrating a special occasion. Again, it just makes you feel closer to that person. Zach often wants to light a candle right in front of his granddad's photo. And when he does that, I know that he's thinking of him. And again, it's like your way of letting them know that you're thinking of them. There are just so many ways that you can do this. And when you're feeling particularly sad, we just imagine heaven together and we just talk about all the fun that he's having up there. And that's quite beautiful as well. Who knows if there is a heaven? Essentially, we will never know. But to think about it, it's very comforting. Regardless of how we try to turn the sad feeling into a happy one or a more manageable one, there will always be sadness. And in those moments, seek comfort. Maybe a warm embrace from a loved one, meditation, maybe prayer if you're religious, or even a hearty meal. But all I can say is just be kind to yourself, because being the person left behind is such a hard task. Just spend time with your loved ones and make memories. Don't have regrets, you know. There's nothing more important than spending time with your family. And maybe this is the time in life when you learn it. Maybe I've learned it late, maybe I'm learning it early, but it would be awful to have regrets and realize that you prioritized something else and didn't spend that time, didn't take that call from your family member, or didn't go over, even if it is for a quick cuppa, because all those little moments, they just bring you closer to the people that you love. If you are the one left behind, I always think that it would be so much easier if you weren't left in financial uncertainty. I mean, you might say it's not all about money, but again, after my experiences, I feel that if you've lost someone or when you lose someone, it's already so hard to comprehend, to figure out, and then to try planning a funeral. And if there is a difficulty when it comes to finances, it just adds a whole other layer of stress, a whole other dimension that you now have to figure out. And that brings me beautifully onto my savvy tip of the day, which is Vitality. Vitality do life insurance and they also do health insurance. And we've had a policy with Vitality for quite a while now. And I just think it is such a good thing, and which is why I wanted to tell you about it. Obviously, not sponsored. This is a very early podcast, maybe one day. But the great thing about Vitality is not only can you get cover, whatever level you can afford, But if you have dependents, it covers them for a nominal amount more. But the best thing about it, and this is where the savvy bit comes in, is that it encourages you to be healthy because it runs on a point system. So the more points you get in the week through doing exercise, whether it's swimming, going to the gym, walking, or just doing anything that gets your heart rate going, you get points which is monitored with your smartwatch, which is then linked to the Vitality app. And the more points you get, the more rewards you get. And in turn, each year, your premiums either stay the same or they might go down, but they're unlikely to go up if you stay within a certain status. I think we're gold at the moment. We're aiming for platinum, which will be the highest. But there are loads of perks. Like if we get a certain number of points each week, then every month we get free cinema tickets. Every week we get a free coffee. When I say free, I mean, you may say that you've kind of paid for it, but at the same time, there are other policies that you would have which only cover you for your health or your life, and you don't get all these extra perks. So I just think it's an amazing thing. You also get discounts on like trainers, on smart devices, on weekends away, holiday. There are so many different things, but we've been with them for a while, and that is my savvy tip. Even if you only have a really small amount of money at the end of each month, please buy a life policy with it. Don't buy a few more coffees in the month. Buy a life policy. We are forced to have insurance on our car. Most people will get insurance on their houses if they have a mortgage. We even insure our expensive goods, like if we have a nice ring or a really nice watch. We insure our mobile phone devices. But does everybody insure their life? And isn't that the most important thing? Your life. Because when you die, you're not taking your phone with you. You're definitely not taking your car with you. And your house is just bricks and it will still be standing, but it's not coming with you. And all those things will be perfectly fine if you're not around, but your family won't. So look after them. If you just take one thing from this podcast today, please get a life insurance policy. Because we just don't know. We just don't know what is around the corner. And of late, I've had some friends that were friends of mine from back in the day that, you know, are going through some stuff. And I'm sure people that are listening also have someone that may have fallen ill, or unexpectedly you found out that someone's passed away that you knew. Shocking things happen all the time. And my advice is just to plan for every eventuality. So my savvy tip of the day, Vitality, health or life insurance with perks. That's the savvy bit. If you are going through a hard time at the moment, whether it is grief or something else, sleep can be impacted. It definitely impacts me. If I've got something on my mind, I struggle or I wake up in the night. I never used to be a worrier when I was younger. I guess most people think they're invincible when they're younger, but as I've got older, I definitely worry a lot more. I'm telling you, it sucks. But a way that you can help to get better quality sleep, and this is just things that myself and Benjamin use, but we take magnesium glycinate or glycinate, however you want to pronounce that. And that really helps. Ben also takes these these gummies. They're called Sound Asleep. The ones he takes is by a company called Better Vits, but they're these gummies that he thinks are really good to help him sleep. Magnesium can really help you. It helps you to sleep longer. You can get better quality of sleep, which is so important. And basically feel less tired, and then you can function a lot better in the day. Another thing that Ben actually got me as one of my birthday presents was a lavender sleep spray. Yeah, he basically just hit up rituals and went a bit crazy and then got me all sorts of smells of jing and other things, but they were all really, really nice. And now everybody's trying to get in on my sleep lavender spray, which is like gold dust to me. So I'm like, no, only 2 pumps, guys, only 2 sprays allowed, but that is ample. And that smell of lavender is really calming and just sends you into such a lovely sleep, especially if you've had a nice hot shower, you've had your magnesium, you've read something, sprayed your lavender spray. Oh my goodness, I'm making myself feel sleepy. But check out those things. Those have been game changers for me. Magnesium and lavender spray for your pillow. You don't have to get Rituals ones. You can look on Amazon. There are all different ones out there, and just make sure it is pure lavender. Really, really good. Moving on to the book that I'm obsessed with, and it really goes hand in hand with the topic of grief. And it's by one of my favorite authors, Carrie Hope Fletcher. And the book is called On the Other Side. And the main character is called Evie Snow. She's 82 and she quietly passes away in her sleep. She's surrounded by her children and her grandchildren, probably the best way to really leave the world. But once she slips away, she reaches the door of her own private heaven and she finds that she becomes her 27-year-old self and the door won't open. And I don't want to give away too much. And it actually took me probably like over a year to read this because it was at a time in my life where I was just so busy and just didn't have time for reading. But it is such a good book. I think I'm going to have to go back and read it again. So check it out. It's called On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher. I would like to end today's podcast by telling you my songs of the week. As I mentioned, my father-in-law's favourite song, I'll tell you that one. It's by someone called Alan Jackson. It's called Angels and Alcohol. It's, just if you'd like to have a listen. That's good old Ronnie's favourite song. But my tune that goes very well with, I guess, grief, missing someone, thinking about someone, is a song by Bruno Mars and it's called Talking to the Moon. Have a listen. It might take you to a place and make you think of some things. But again, music, thinking, talking, crying, it's all amazing therapy. Please remember that everything that I talk about on my podcast is all my own opinions. I did do some research on the NSPCC website when talking about how children deal with grief, so that I wasn't giving you any incorrect advice. But please take the information on this podcast as a bit of food for thought and look into these things yourself. Thank you so much for listening. Don't mean to sound cheesy, but for those who have been loyal listeners, I really do appreciate it. And please do share if you enjoy the content of the Flip Flop Family podcast. Click on the ring bell and it will alert you every time we release a new podcast, which is every Monday and Thursday. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.